Hello, I'm Melinda Hindenburger, and this is Woman Up, Politics Daily's online Sunday show, and your antidote to too many men on your TV screen on this Super Bowl Sunday. Before today's game, Barack Obama will be making nice with his pal Katie Couric, and during a highly anticipated commercial break, Tim and Pam Tebow will be telling the highly controversial story of how Tim's mom was advised to get an abortion when she was pregnant with her Heisman Trophy winner son and decided against it. I have a new favorite sports columnist, the wonderful Sally Jenkins of the Washington Post. True, I did not have an old favorite sports columnist, but still. And I want to quote from what Jenkins, who describes herself as pro-choice, wrote this week in the Post. She said, "As statements at Super Bowls go, I prefer the idea of Tebow's pro-life ad to say Jim McMahon's dropping his pants, as the former Chicago Bears quarterback once did in response to a question. We're always harping on athletes to be more responsible and engaged in the issues of the day and less concerned with just cashing checks. It therefore seems a little hypocritical to insist on it only if it means criticizing sneaker companies and to stifle them when they make a stance that might make us uncomfortable." Tebow's 30-second ad hasn't even run yet, but it's already provoked the National Organization for Women Who Think Like Us to reveal something important about themselves. They aren't actually pro-choice so much as they're pro-abortion, she wrote. Pam Tebow has a genuine pro-choice story to tell. She got pregnant in '87, post Roe v. Wade, and while on a Christian mission in the Philippines, contracted a tropical ailment. Doctors advised her the pregnancy could be dangerous, but she exercised her freedom of choice, and now, 20-some years later, the outcome of that choice is her beauteous Heisman Trophy winner son, a chaste, proselytizing evangelical. Patricia Murphy, why is this ad so controversial and such a big deal? And should it be?
Well, I think it should be because Tim Tebow is wandering into territory where a lot of other pro athletes might advise him not to, in terms of having a political message or having a moral message. It's certainly his story to tell and it's his message to have. But Michael Jordan, we remember, famously said that Democrats and Republicans all buy running shoes, and he doesn't want to alienate half of his fan base. And so we've seen a lot of football players, interestingly, Doug Flutie, and although Curt Schilling is a baseball player, we've seen kind of a lot of pro athletes.
Yes, and we learned that again recently, right?
Exactly. So
Curt Schilling who?
Yeah. So it's interesting to see him coming out here. He is risking losing and alienating some of his fan base, but again, it's a choice that he feels strongly about, so he's going to go out there and do it. But it has its
and choice is the word here.
Yes, it is.
So Bonnie Erbe, how should pro-choice groups react? In anger, with an ad of their own? What would the way to go be in this case?
Well, I must say I'm very pro-choice. It's a woman's body; it's her decision, as far as I'm concerned, and there should be no other guidelines. But on the other hand, the so-called pro-choice movement has lost so much ground in the last 20 years that I do think they have, they need to regroup and figure out what a good approach is, because being angry and strident, which is how now reacted this time, it just doesn't play in today's market. And if they had just raised money, gotten their own ad together, just as compassionate, showing a woman, as we've reported on, as I've reported on in the past, showing a woman with 4 or 5 children in Mississippi, no money, can't even feed the kids she has, and then she goes to the one remaining out of what used to be 7 abortion clinics in Mississippi, and she's told she has to wait 24 hours, and her kids are 300 miles away. She doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. If they had shown that side of it, equally compassionate, issue done with. And what they've really done
is it'll never be issue done with where this one is concerned.
For this ad.
Right.
But what they've really done is raise the profile of the ad. I mean, it's like, to spell my name right, any publicity is good publicity, and now everybody's going to tune in to watch that ad.
There was another controversy because this Man Crunch ad from a gay dating site was turned down. Did they even want to get the ad on, or Helena Andrews? What was your thought on that?
I think on the Man Crunch ad, which was so funny, why do we know what Man Crunch is? I'm not a gay man, so why would I be interested in this? But now I know what it is, because they had this ad that personally I don't think they care whether it was on the Super Bowl or not, because the controversy surrounding it gave them just as much publicity as spending $3 million to have an ad that airs on the Super Bowl that may not have been towards their target audience. I don't know. Who knows who's watching the Super Bowl, whether there are a lot of gay men watching the Super Bowl. I'm sure there are, just like there's a lot of gays who serve in the military. So I think that the controversy surrounding the ad can be just as beneficial.
Sure,
as
now they got the ad
publicity.
out there for free.
Exactly.
How
People are
terrific for
showing it,
them,
and
right?
it's a funny
What
ad.
chump pays for the ad when they can get it
Exactly.
on The View and not pay?
And not pay at all. And it's a funny ad. It's two guys who have their jerseys on, they're watching a game, and then they accidentally touch hands,
Woo!
reaching for Cheetos. And then they have this, it's not a Brokeback Mountain moment, but then they start making out. And it's funny, it's not gratuitous.
Right.
And now we all know about it.
Right. So this was actually kind of a big week in the culture wars because there were a couple of other really interesting studies. And Rhea, because you write a lot about science, I was interested in your take on this new abstinence-only education study that seemed to show, for the first time, it seemed like a very well-designed study, that abstinence-only programs, and I was on Bonnie's show just last week saying we all know those don't work, but from this study, it looks like I could have been wrong. It happens.
Well, what I really found interesting, what really struck me about this study right away, is that it is a little different than some of the abstinence-only programs that we've seen in the past, in the sense that they weren't saying, wait until marriage, they were saying, wait until you're ready, which is a very different kind of message than I think some of the proponents of abstinence-only education might be hoping for. I do think it might be interesting to see what happens in terms of abstinence education in terms of age. I mean, I know this study was directed at younger kids, at
Right.
people
12-year-olds.
12-year-olds,
Right.
yeah, which is
6th and 7th graders.
which-
Whoa.
Exactly. And then it's also interesting to look at it in terms of another study that also came out not too long ago, that abortions and teen pregnancies rose under abstinence-only education programs.
Right.
But I
But do we now have to try to figure out if there is hope for at least some kinds of abstinence-only education? Do we have to think of what the other reasons might be for the rise in teen pregnancy and abortion rates? Bonnie,
Well,
you were
my
gonna say.
question is this: why do they call that study an abstinence-only group? Because they were offering, when kids asked for it, full biological disclosure, and that is not. See, that's what got me about.
Well-
First of all, they were younger, okay, and it showed that after 14, there was no. For 2 years, yes, they postponed sex, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have
Right.
it as very young teenagers.
Those are important
But
2 years.
secondly,
But that is an important 2 years.
if they asked about, where does a baby come from? Unlike the Bush-style abstinence only. I mean, can you imagine
But what they
if there were a
compared-
condoms only sex ed
But
class?
what they
how people would
compared
go-
was so interesting. They found that, yes, a third of these kids who had abstinence only went on to have sex within the next 2 years. But that compared to 52% in the control group and 40-something% in the kids who got safe sex info and in the kids who got a mixed approach. Those are kind of mind-boggling numbers. I personally wouldn't have believed it. So before we quit, we only have a few seconds before we wrap up here, but is everybody going to watch the Super Bowl today? Are we going to tune out after we watch Obama's interview with Katie?
I'll watch if we have power in Washington. I'll be watching and I'll say, go Saints, who dat?
All right, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.